Tony, who is Tony Michaelides and what's your backstory?
Well, it's Michaelides for a start, but we won't go there. What's my backstory? Well, I was born in Manchester in the UK, which culturally has always been a music city, going back to bands like 10cc, Freddie and the Dreamers and stuff. The Bee Gees lived there, Graham Nash. So I kind of grew up, I went to school there and I lived there till I was 50. And I decided the music industry was falling apart around me and it was time to emigrate. So I kind of did my David Bowie Ziggy Stardust book and came out here to reinvent myself. No regrets. But my pretty much most of my career was from the age of 20 working in the music industry. Started selling records out the back of a van, folk and jazz, which I knew nothing about, other than the fact that I had a lousy job. Not that I was one of those guys that further education in the UK was perfect for people like me who were done with school but not quite ready for work. So I went to a further education college, and I thought at the time I might want to be a lawyer, but that didn't last because that's my least greatest asset. And I saw a job in the local paper, the Manchester Evening News, and it was for a sales representative on this label I'd never heard of. So I went to the local HMV store at my lunchtime and pulled out a bunch of records that I'd never heard of. But I just thought, well, I don't have a job in the music business. If I don't get it, I still won't have a job in the music business. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. And I didn't get it initially. And then the guy phoned me back after 6 months and offered me the job. So that was kind of great because I was going into record stores in the north of England with like 7,500 albums in the back, selling everything from folk music to comedy to some of the greatest jazz performers that at my age I'd never heard of, like McCoy Tyner and Miles Davis and people like that. But I really liked it. And I did that for a couple of years. And I went to ABC Records, who just started in the UK, a label called Anchor. And they had Steely Dan and bands like that. And also a great country catalogue with Don Williams and Freddie Fender. And then in 78, I started in PR for Island Records, which was kind of like amazing because I'd been buying all my records in the 60s. And then all of a sudden in the 70s, they were paying me and giving me all the records for free. So I got to work with people whose records I'd bought as a kid. So that doesn't happen to a kid from the north of England. So I really don't think the gratitude sets in till you do get older and you look back and think that was quite a ride. So like now, just talking about experiences and things that I learned along the way. I have a couple of brands which are like Moments That Rock, which is my podcast and my latest book. And then I have a thing called Lessons Learned from Rock and Roll, which are lessons for corporate America that just happen to involve bands that people grew up on, like U2 and David Bowie. So that's a short answer for me, Dennis.
Well, somewhere along the way, you walked among some of the gods in the music industry. What are some of the people you hung out with, so to speak?
Well, the bigger they get, the less you hang out with them because they're busy. They're kind of, if you get successful, as an artist, then you tour the world. I mean, you release a new album, it takes you like 2 to 3 years to profile it in different territories. But I suppose I mean, two of the biggest artists, if you like, people that I work with that I learned the most from. U2, I kind of grew up learning their trade. Well, I was learning mine. They would come round to barbecues at my house when they played Manchester. And it's really interesting because people like Bono were curious to learn everything. So I'd have him bending my ear about this and that and everything. And it's funny to watch a band like that grow because the first time I saw them was the 31st of May 1980, and they were third on the bill. And I went with a local DJ from the local radio station, Piccadilly Radio, and there was something about them. I mean, the bass player wasn't very good, the drummer was okay, but it was at a university gig, 300 or 400 people, but nobody was there to see this, the third band on the bill. Everybody's round at the bar. In those days, you could hear the till ringing and people talking. So there's like 20, 30 people at the front of the stage. But they really just came out and played like they were playing to a stadium. And when I went home with my friend, who was my lodger, we just stayed up half the night talking about him. And as a result of that, I went to see him 4 times over the next 7 days. And I went to see him play in a pub in Manchester to 11 people. And four of those people had come to me. So I use kind of artists like you two as kind of, content material for the lessons learned from rock and roll, because there are so many things that I learned from, like episodes like Live Aid, that if anybody wants to know about, I'll talk about later on. But mistakes turning into opportunities. And another subject matter is preparing for success, because when they were preparing for the school disco when they were 18, they decided that they were going to share all the publishing. And that's a big issue with a lot of bands. And coming from Manchester, which is it split up bands like the Stone Roses and the Smiths, because all of a sudden when the money comes in and the two guys that didn't write the songs don't get as much as the two that did. Well, that's a lesson in getting your house in order from day one. And the other thing, which is probably my career highlight, is working with David Bowie as his publicist, because I went to see David Bowie split up the Spiders from Mars in front of me as an 18-year-old. And I was furious with him because I was thinking, well, where's my next David Bowie record going to come from? You can't do this. And then 30 years later, I'm sitting down having my dinner with him, arranging all his radio and TV on tour. And for me, that's the closest thing to getting knighted. I'm not going to get knighted, but I did get to work with Bowie. And that is a big part of my journey, working with people whose records I bought as a kid. But I found him. I've always said along the way that the biggest artists are quite often the easiest to work with. And I learned so much from Bowie, and the business lessons that I talk about with people like Bowie are. I read an article a couple of years ago that Mike Garson, who played piano with Bowie for the best part of 30 odd years, wrote. He said the great thing about Bowie was he didn't micromanage. And people I've interviewed in my podcast over the years, I interviewed a guy that played guitar with him. And my first question was to him was, Kevin, we're not talking about playing tambourine with a lesser mortal. You played guitar with David Bowie at Live Aid. Do not think, and this came as a result of what I'd heard Mike Garson saying, because if David Bowie gives you a job to do and leaves you to it, you're not going to go out and be the best guitar player you've ever been. Of course you are. Well, for me, when I was allowed the room to do exactly what I wanted with him, and he was asking my advice on what TV and radio and press interviews you should do. I mean, let's face it, who doesn't want to talk to David Bowie or write about him? And he would say to me, what do you think, Tony? And I said, well, if I was going to do one David, I would do this guy from the BBC because he's a big fan. And he looked at me and he said, well, if you think I should do it, I'll do it, And I felt like, and I'm not starstruck in any sense of the word, but I walked out of the room and I was clenching my fist, and I thought, I don't believe this. David Bowie's agreed to do something on my recommendation. But just to finish the little Bowie experience, there was one of my jobs on that tour in 1997. Was you had all the photographers in the orchestra pit, and they were allowed to take the first three numbers. I mean, back in the day when I was growing up, some of the best photos in rock, like the Hendrix Bernie's guitar and stuff, Woodstock, and the photographers were allowed on the stage. But now you can't. They're allowed to photograph the first three numbers. So my job was to throw the photographers out of the pit, saying, "Come on, guys, you've got to go now. You've got to go." So if you can just picture this, and if I burst into tears, no apologies. But Bowie would walk out with an acoustic guitar, with a white satin shirt, white silk pants, no shoes or socks, looking like David Bowie, and literally stand in front of me with a white spotlight on him, looking like David Bowie, like I said, and play a song from Ziggy Stardust or Hunky Dory. And I was like this. It was like a private concert. And it took me back to when I was 18, seeing that. And this was like a private concert. So I hope it doesn't sound like starstruck, because it's just appreciative of the opportunity that you had. But, you create your own opportunities, I suppose.
Wow.
So what was the question?
There, Mark's got his hand up.
Did you Tony, did you work with David Bowie until the end of his life?
No, I didn't actually. The thing about Bowie was, listen, I'll be perfectly honest, David Bowie would have been fine without me. I mean, I got you to their first radio, national radio and TV appearance outside of the native island. So I had a part to play with you two, getting to where they were. I mean, it takes a team of people. It wasn't just me. But with Bowie, I mean, he was already kind of a superstar then. But with Bowie, I worked that tour, which was a small venues tour, which was great because you didn't see him in like huge arenas. He would go out and play festivals in Europe. But with that, he didn't do much after that, Mark, because he had like a sabbatical. Um, in as much as he had the best part of 10 years on. And Bowie got liver cancer down the line,
Hmm.
but nobody really knew about it apart from a few people. So he was very much out of the, of the star that he was, playing, regularly and stuff. But some of the things that Bowie said in that period, because when Bowie was like, around the Ziggy Stardust time when he exploded. And I mean, he had a drug problem and everything, And the thing with Bowie is he was smart enough to kill off his drug addiction in his 20s, as at the same time he killed off Ziggy Stardust. So if you look at that 27 club that they call the Brian Jones, the Janis Joplins, the Jimi Hendrixes, the Kurt Cobains, they all died at 27 because they become famous and then everything takes over and they die from addiction and stuff. Bowie was smart enough to kill it off before it killed him off, or we wouldn't be talking about him now and stuff. But Bowie had the foresight to know what the next part of his career was coming. And he was constantly evolving. And a lot of the things that he did um, are things that nobody else has done that I experienced as much as a fan as I did as somebody that was promoting him. I mean, I actually promoted his records for 12 years, but he didn't do any, he didn't do much regional promotion, which was my job. He would do maybe national TVs and stuff and things like that, but he wouldn't go into local radio stations and things like that. Um, but like I say, when he got older, I'm not saying he got more mature and stuff, but for instance, here's another classic example. And I saw this firsthand at a U2 gig. They played a gig in London supporting Talking Heads. And Talking Heads were very popular, and U2 got the support slot. And I was stood by the mixing desk, and U2 went down pretty well. And during the set, the sound guy of Talking Heads came over, just moved up to the mixing desk, and slowly brought down the faders to make sure that they weren't going down too well because the headline act still had to come. The thing
Wow.
with David Bowie was he had like two bands in particular, the Pixies and Nine Inch Nails, both who at the time were creating a greater press vibe and buzz than Bowie, because Bowie had periods where he did experimental albums with drum and bass and stuff, which weren't as popular as others. And he put them on support slots, which is not only brave to run the risk of them actually going down better than you, but not only did he do that, he would stand at the side of the stage and watch their performance. I mean, what would you feel like if you were supporting David Bowie and he was watching your set? Again,
Well,
you just go out and play the best you've ever played, don't you?
um, it's at least arguable that he broke Stevie Ray Vaughan by having Stevie Ray play on his Let's Dance record.
Yeah.
Having seen him somewhere, probably in some local club. I just want to make a couple of other comments. One, I can't believe you mentioned Freddie and the Dreamers. Um, my sons are now 41 and 38. And when they were kids, I used to talk to them about Freddie and the Dreamers, and they didn't believe they existed. And I remember when Freddie and the Dreamers played on the Ed Sullivan Show in the States. Freddie, I guess he was the front guy. He used to jump around the stage with the microphone, acting like it was an electric shaver, like
Yeah.
rubbing it on his face and stuff. And the other thing I just want to mention is, as a late blooming college student, I was at Trinity College in the school year 1983, 1984. And for spring break that year, the band was U2.
Really?
And I
Excellent.
thought, I have no idea who those clowns are, so I didn't go.
Well, here's something for you, Mark, that I've never had the opportunity to talk about. But apart from Freddie and the Dreamers, do you remember Herman's Hermits? They were huge in America. They were
Oh,
from Manchester as
absolutely.
well. But
Yeah.
not only, I don't think I've ever done a kind of interview stroke, thing like this where anybody's mentioned Freddie and the Dreamers after I've mentioned them myself. I lived on the same road as Freddie Garrity. And I
Wow.
walked past his house when he had a top 10 record. He was cutting the lawn. And it was like, I was like 8 or something. It was
Well,
insane.
I'm so glad this is being recorded because I'm going to show it to my sons and I'm going to say, "Hey, fellas, come on." Thank you.
It was funny actually, because in that time you had all the Mersey beat stuff, Mark, with all stuff coming over from Liverpool and everything.
Yeah.
There was Manchester. There was also people like Wayne Fontana and the Mindbenders and stuff and things. And yeah, it was kind of quirky pop because he did kind of silly records. He looked quite goofy, didn't he, old Freddie?
Yeah.
You would never point him out. I mean, put it this way: if he went on American Idol, I don't think he'd win.
No, probably not. And there was somebody, I can't remember his name, somebody in the Mersey Beats.
Oh, Jerry Marsden, Jerry and the
That's it.
Mersey,
That's
Jerry
it.
and the Pacemakers.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah. Well, actually, he has an anthem that Liverpool Football Club sing called "We'll
Hmm.
Never Walk Alone," which is kind of what all 50,000 fans sing in a day. Anyway, I don't know how we got into that. I'll blame you.
Okay, yeah, I'll
Next.
take it.
Well, I'm glad we're back on, and thank you for recording it, so at least Dennis can hear it. What a
And
shame.
I see Minku's hand up. Minku, please go
By the
ahead.
way, Minku.
Hey, hey, hey. Tony, so good to have this conversation. You do remember we had 1 hour conversation. You were episode 30 on my talk show.
Yeah, and that was a while back now, Minku, wasn't
Yes,
it?
it was almost coming up to an year, and it was fantastic. So for me, it's deja vu.
Yeah, well, thank you
You
for
know.
turning up. I really appreciate it, especially as you're in the evening there and you should be
Thank
walking.
you. Thank you. You know what's really, I'm very curious. Why did David call himself Ziggy Stardust? Was it like an alter ego?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I think there was something that he saw in a tailor shop. Do you want to just tell us the background? Because I'm
Well,
very curious.
the story behind Ziggy was he created this, it was like his alter ego and his androgynous period where, the other thing with Bowie was he would wear dresses and stuff and he would be outrageous. And in those times, obviously times have changed and stuff, but it would have been a recipe for disaster to come out as gay and sell records in America. But Bowie did it as kind of curiosity. He didn't say yes or he didn't say no. He kept people guessing, like he did with his music as well. And I think with Ziggy Stardust, he created this myth of this alien rock star, but he became it in as much as like he became that persona that was that artist on stage and the way they were dressed. And then I don't remember, apart from the Beatles, I don't remember anybody going to concerts dressing up like the main act. And all these people were coming with like Ziggy flashes across their face and stuff and things. And it was quite an incredible period. And then he killed it off. And I've read a lot of stuff, since I worked with him about Bowie and stuff. And the thing is, he had Hunky Dory before that. And then he went on to like The Man Who Sold the World. Sorry, that was before The Man Who Sold the World. And then he moved on, he went to Berlin and he made like records with Brian Eno and stuff. So he's constantly evolving. As something reached its peak, he didn't keep it going. There are a lot of bands around now, Minku, that release 5 or 6 albums. If one of them's successful, the next one's pretty much the same with different songs on, but the same kind of sound. Whereas Bowie was very much adventurous. The thing is, Bowie was into all forms of art, like he saw, and I read this isn't my own words, but he saw the music industry as the easiest entry route to do all his other stuff like mime and theatre, and then he was in films and stuff and things like that. So I think that the Ziggy thing was something that well, I mean, the thing is, I'm bumbling here, hang on. It was obviously an idea of creating this alien rock star. The interesting thing about it was that back in the day, then he had this company called Main Man Management that were looking after him, and what he didn't realise was as all this was going about, and they built up this myth of this alien rock star to a public who hadn't yet seen him. But when he walked out on stage, he was every bit as good as he should have been. Because if you go out and you're trying to bluff the public, you'll never get them back. But the thing with Bowie is the audience embraced him, and he moved on from that. But the thing with Ziggy was that it was always in his head that was going to be for a period of time. And I interviewed a girl called Susie Ronson on a podcast just a couple of weeks ago, and she was married to Mick Ronson. Well, she was working in a hairdressing salon. She wasn't the owner. She was just one of the hairdressers in a South London hair salon. And David Bowie's mother used to come in and talk to him about her son. And he just had that hit, Space Oddity. So he was like a one-hit wonder. And then all of a sudden, like, she came in and she got to know Susie Ronson. Well, she wasn't Susie Ronson then. And she invited her to come onto the tour. And she was the only woman out of 18 people on the road with Bowie. And Bowie was touring the world with Ziggy. And they were staying in the best hotels and flying first class. And David Bowie was behind on his rent in his London apartment. And little did he realise until after he got rid of his manager that he was paying for all these things. So it was kind of a disaster in kind of a business lesson, so to speak. But it still gave him the courage to kind of not have any resentments towards it, because a lot of artists get ripped off along the way because they're just driven on adrenaline and enthusiasm. But Bowie moved forward into the next stage. And the thing is, the weird thing, he had an album called Aladdin Sane. And I learned about this on YouTube. But all the things that he was doing was relative to him. And you look at the album, it's called Aladdin Sane. And I saw this thing on YouTube, and the guy was talking about it. He said, that actually translates into a lad insane. So he's writing an album about his state of mind. This isn't normal rock and roll, I tell you. I don't know if I managed to answer a bit of that.
No, no, absolutely. I've always been so curious about that, and yeah, I
Is it?
totally see how he was playing out his different avatars to, in this
Yeah.
end point. Yeah, thank you for that.
No, my pleasure. But I think, Minku, the thing with Bowie is he'll always create questions long after his death, because I don't think there's been an artist that has had such an impact on music as he has, because you know you can like so many different types of music, but a lot of people revert back to Bowie and remember different stages of his career, and he was never frightened about um, taking one step out. He had for 3 years he did something with a band called Tin Machine, where he was just part of a band, and it didn't sell and it didn't do anything, but he didn't break it up after 6 months and go on to something that would be more successful. And the people that he worked with as well, when he did Live Aid and he was dancing with Jagger, and everything. So he made some incredibly, powerful moments. And even, not to sound depressing, but when Bowie died, he died quietly. And if you look at the last record he recorded, Lazarus, he actually orchestrated his death. He didn't even die until he'd finished his album. He died 2 days after his 69th birthday and 2 days after his album came out. It was almost like, I need to finish this. And when Bowie died, I'm sure a lot of people saw it on the news. It was like probably that and Bob Marley's death were probably my worst days in the music industry in 30 plus years, because I was living on St. Pete Beach, and I woke up one morning, it was like 4 in the morning, and I turned the TV on and it was CNN, and it said like, David Bowie has died, age 69. And I'm kind of rubbing my eyes and looking at the screen, and I can't believe this. And I got up and I walked into the kitchen to put the coffee on. I was bumping into things. I put the coffee on and I just burst into tears. I thought, and I was angry. I said, you can't die. Normal people die. You're David Bowie. You can't die. You create this myth of this alien rock star and you think you can die. No, we're not accepting that. And then the thing is, then I looked at my phone, and so many texts, so many messages. I had a breakfast show from a radio station in the UK wanting to interview me. I mean, fortunately, I was up at that time. I had the Tampa Bay Times wanting to come and interview me, the local TV station. And I had to reach out to the people in Minku and say, listen, I realize you have deadlines to meet, but can I just have some time to grieve? It was horrific because they've all got stories, the media, and you're mourning like a human being. I mean, it's not like we'd grown up together, but he had a huge influence on my life. He made me better at what I did through working with him. So it
Yeah.
was an incredibly strange time.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Hey, Mark, I know you got your hand up, but just thank you for keeping it going. We had a really unusual power failure over here, and reports are coming in, Tony, that the UK regulators were listening in and they decided to censor me.
I can believe it. Not
Uh, Anyhow, we're back. Thanks for hanging in there. Mark, thanks for keeping it going. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, you're welcome, Dennis. Thank you. I was just
I think
soaking
we've
in all that.
recorded, aren't we?
What's that?
Are you recording, Mark?
Yes.
Oh, right, cool.
Um,
You've got a bit of editing to do, Dennis.
Yes.
so I was just taking in everything that you were just saying about Bowie's passing, and I know what you mean about some people, and you think, no, they can't be gone. So
Yeah.
just a couple of things occurred to me when you were talking. When you said, some act to make one record and then they try to live off that. And the first band that came to mind was Boston. If they had put Don't Look Back from their second album on their first album and then quit, I think they and everybody else would have been fine. And the other thing that came to my mind was my discovery of writers and musicians that I otherwise might not have known about or appreciated unless I heard other people cover their songs. And I'll give you 3 examples. When I first heard Jimi Hendrix cover Like a Rolling Stone at the Monterey Pop Festival in 1967, I had no idea Bob Dylan wrote that. And then the next year, when Johnny Winter's Second Winter came out and he covered Highway 61 Revisited, I had no idea Bob Dylan wrote that. And when I found out, I was thinking, oh my God, what an amazing writer. By the same token, I never have been a fan of Iggy Pop or the Stooges, but when I heard David Bowie's cover of China Girl,
Yeah.
and found out Iggy Pop wrote that, I was absolutely blown away.
Yeah. It's funny you should say that, Mark, because I mean, if you going back to Hendrix, you remember, like, if you heard Bob Dylan do All Along the Watchtower and you heard Hendrix do it,
Well, yeah.
and going back to Nine Inch Nails, Trent Reznor, who was basically Nine Inch Nails, I don't know if you've heard it, but Johnny Cash's version of Hurt,
Yep.
he said, I can't believe when I hear that song that I wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you hear Johnny Cash do it, and it was shortly before he died and everything, after his wife had died and stuff and everything, and it's almost like he had to have written that song. And I think I've no time for people who do cover versions that are exactly the same as the original.
No.
But when you come out, and there's another one which Disturbed do
Yes.
called Sounds of Silence,
Absolutely.
which is phenomenal, and it's nothing like Simon and Garfunkel.
Yep. While other folks are talking, I'm going to find something to put in the chat window. But one more thing about Jimi Hendrix doing Like a Rolling Stone at Monterey. There's a point in which he just doesn't even break stride, but he says, "Yes, I know I missed a verse. Don't worry." And he just keeps going. It's just brilliant. So thank you. I'm going to find something for you and put it in the chat window.
Okay, excellent.
Well,
Tony,
talk
let me-
about Hendrix. I thought it was quite cool when he did Star Spangled Banner at Woodstock, and he had jet aircraft and everything just swooshing through that music.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Amazing.
It was so funny actually because I worked for this tech company for a few years called Magic Leap, and there was a guy who was head of kind of content who had Vivo and sold it and came to Magic Leap. And he was called Rio Karev. His dad took that photo of Hendrix burning his guitar on stage, and that was the saying about before. You would never get a photograph like that if you took it from the orchestra pit.
Yep.
He was 15 and he got on stage and took that photograph, which is probably arguably one of the greatest rock and roll photos of all time.
Tony, another question for you.
Yes, sir.
I know you kind of stumbled into the music industry, you said, I think when you were 20. If that didn't happen, what did you want to be when you were growing up? What did you think you were going to do?
Well, the thing is, coming from Manchester, Dennis, I mean, I did what every other kid my age wanted to do. But 14, 15, I wanted to play for Manchester United. I mean, I suppose if it was now, I'd want to play for Manchester City, but we won't go there. And the other thing is, when I was like 15, 16, I wanted to be a rock star. And when I was kind of 17, I grew up because I realized I was a crap bass player. But I had the foresight to think that I'm not going to get anywhere with this. So I went from playing bass in the band to managing them, which was a dead easy job because didn't have a record contract and we weren't doing any gigs. So I didn't have much to manage. And then after that, that was kind of the period when I went into further education. And then after that, the thing is, when I got that job, I needed a job to buy records and go to gigs. It wasn't that I wasn't ambitious, it's just that I didn't really have a clue. And that's, like I said before, further education was perfect for people like me who were done with school and not ready for work. So it gave me a kind of bedding in period. And then I got a job, and I wrote about this in my book. I got a job, but it was a crap job. Nothing about it inspired me. The office manager came in and he'd sit in his glass partitioned office and wouldn't come out and interact with the staff or anything. And he would send his PA out to buy flowers for his wife for their wedding anniversary and stuff, and somebody to go out and wash his car. And there was nothing that made me want to be him, so to speak. And I had another guy who'd been there 7 years. And from the moment he came in, he couldn't stop talking about wait until Friday when he could get in the pub with his mates. And I'm thinking, oh my God, have I have to listen to this? And the weird thing about it was my entry route, so to speak, Dennis, and I didn't usually do that, but I bought a copy of the Manchester Evening News, which, was a big local paper, and there was an advert for the sales representative of Transatlantic Record. Now, I didn't normally buy the Evening News, and when I did buy it, it was only to see what gigs were happening or to see what records they were reviewing. And for some reason, I went through to the classified ads and saw this, and I went round to the HMV shop and went through the records and saw artists I'd never even, none of those artists were in my record collection. But like I said, I didn't have a job in the music industry. And I thought if I don't get it, I won't have a job in the music industry. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. But the thing is, back in those days, we used to have careers officers come to school, but they taught you about getting proper jobs like banks and accountants and lawyers and, the real world. Nobody comes and teaches you how to get into. I mean, it's kind of a closed shop, so to speak, the music industry. But I think the good thing about that was when I got into it, and these are my own words, it was a job that I never expected, that I would never let go. And, I went out every single day to prove to that guy who employed me that it was the best decision he ever made. And I was working 200 miles from the nerve centre, i.e. London. And I could have ducked and dived and not gone and called on stores, but I was there driving through the snow and rain or whatever to my first, shop at like 9 in the morning. And I built up a lot of good relationships. And then when I ended up, after 4 years of that, going to work for my all-time favorite record label, I mean, it's a kind of a wake-up call because you're growing up in a job that you're passionate about. So I never had any feelings of Monday morning blues. And the other thing is, in a perverse sort of way, I've never been a 9 to 5 person, and I love the fact that I woke up every morning. I had no clue what was going to happen. You could have you know, you could have a lead singer overdose before a network TV, and you can't let panic set in. I came from a generation of people that made it up as we went along. You dealt with situations that happened, and the thing is, some of my best friends I met through the music industry. But believe you me, any industry that can create a lot of money attracts a lot of pretty dreadful people who are only in it for the money. So, I was fortunate enough to distance myself from the assholes and then kind of just, work my way up, so to speak. But even looking back on the decisions that I made, when I got offered a job to move to London, um, I didn't want to do it because my wife was pregnant at the time, and I had a 3-year-old daughter, and I didn't want to up and move them to London and have them live in a bedsit and me be out at gigs every night of the week. So my job was regional promotion, and the guy said to me when he employed me, and this was a label called A&M, who at the time had the Police and Every Breath You Take and Ghosts in the Machines, who were the biggest band in the world. And when he said to me he was happy that I was going to take the job, and he said, "When are you moving to London?" I said, "I'm not moving to London." He said, "What do you mean you have to move to London?" And I remember I was looking out into the garden. My daughter was playing in the paddling pool with her friends, and I said, "I don't have to do anything." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Why would I travel 200 miles south to travel 400 miles north to do my job?" I mean, Manchester is smack dab in the middle of the country. So it made a lot of sense to me. And as a result of that, I set up my own PR company based in Manchester. I was the first person to do it in the UK, with having an office outside of London. Because like with the record industry in general, I mean, it's LA, it's New York, it's Nashville, it's London, it's like capital cities and stuff. And Manchester was, a hub of talent, music. I'd grown up listening to those bands and watching them, and there was a lot of creative industries. And there was a guy who ran Factory Records called Tony Wilson, and I still have the bag here in my closet, and it's his own words, and it says, "We're from Manchester, we do things differently here."
Mhm.
And that's such a cool, phrase. And I always refer to myself as adopted Yank, always a Mank.
Uh, all right, Tony, I'm going to go back over to Richard and Mark in just a minute, but just connecting the dots on that. So you backed into the music industry. I guess you kind of wanted to be, but then you got into it and you learned a lot. You spent 50 years. You talked about a lot of the wisdom you picked up, and I know you put a lot of that in your book. What about regrets? Do you have any regrets looking back over those 50 years? Maybe something you would have done differently or
Do you know, Dennis? I mean, it's easy to say, but I think, like now that I'm, dare use the word, drifted into a grown up, I kind of look back on things. Now, no, I don't have any regrets because I've said this, and these are my own words. Like, because now I'm writing about, I love storytelling, and I have the stories, and I don't want to sound like a jerk by saying that, but I have my own quotes, which is, "I'm blessed to have the stories, but cursed to have to remember them." Um, and the it's not like, I mean, I say this to people. I said, if I'd have picked up some of the records that I was offered for some of the money I was offered, I would never met any of you lot. I'd be living on some island in the middle of nowhere with a shitload of money and no mates, because I was very selective. I didn't want to. I hope it doesn't sound pretentious, but I didn't want to put my name to doing a record that I didn't think I could do something on. Don't get me wrong, not everything worked. Not every record you promoted and stuff were hits. Um, but I think one of my assets was my ability to pick the right sort of people, because when I started my own promotion company, I never employed anybody that had worked for a record company. I just employed people that I thought had that certain something, and I gave them one piece of advice: whatever you screw up on, I'll pull you out of. So I was saving them. Like, I was working with Simon Cowell then, and everybody knows Simon Cowell is the most famous man in the world. Trust me, I've worked some of the worst records in history that he was putting out at that time. Bus conductors, or Muppets that were making records and stuff. But I would stand up to him and I would save my staff having to deal with him. And good luck to Simon, he's done incredibly well and everything. But with the people I employed, I mean, 3 people left and started up their own PR companies. One guy went on to national radio and is still there now, 15 years later. And my intern went on to manage Coldplay. So when I talk about artist development, I don't talk about working with bands from U2, like from day one, and getting them those tiny little interviews that you can get, and then eventually getting them. It took me 2 years to get them on the radio. I mean, nowadays the industry has changed. You would never get that amount of time to work and act. And my area of expertise, if I can say, is artist development. But I don't think it begins and ends with bands. I think it's about people, because if you allow them to grow and you don't threaten them with their jobs, it's don't say, "Go out and get this on the playlist," or "Guess what, you won't have a job." And even the girl who came to work with me, I give her credit for getting the job herself, because I got a phone call from, she just graduated at Cardiff University in Wales, and she said, "I'm moving to Manchester, and I've been told I should come and work for you." I said, "Well, that's very flattering." I said, "But there's no room at the inn." And she said, which was basically saying I was full up, there was no job vacancies. And she said, "Well, I'm coming up this weekend. Can we at least have a drink?" I said, "Yeah, we can have a drink." So we went out, and she said, "I'll come and work for you for nothing." And I looked at her, I said, "Well, I can't say no to that." I said, "But you know what? You will be making cups of tea." I said, "But guess what? I make cups of tea." I said, "We can't send you out on the road with artists because we have a responsibility to be part of their careers. But I can put you in the back of the car with somebody who's going out, taking them into radio interviews. You can learn how it's done." And then after 6 months, I paid her, and she stayed with me for like 18 months, 2 years, and then she ended up working with a band called Happy Mondays, and then on to Coldplay. But you see, I credit myself for having the guts to give her a job with no experience and to let her grow at the pace that she could grow. But she got that job by the hustle, by saying to me, "I'll come and work for you for nothing." That showed me that I'm determined. And in a way, it kind of was a little like my entry route, in as much as I didn't have a job, I might as well go for it. And she was doing the same. She was moving to Manchester anyway. She wanted to come and work at my place, but she got her the job. So I kind of applaud her for that. You see, I think in an industry like this, we're all hustlers, but it's like how you hustle. You don't want to get in people's faces and piss them off and just
Mm.
be a pain in the neck.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Mark, I see your hand up next.
Uh, but I've already gone and Richard has not. So Richard,
Okay,
please go right ahead.
I'm going to keep this real simple. Tony, it just absolutely amazes me the career that you've had, the people you've associated with. You started early. Your music was a big part of your life. And, there's similar parallels for me. Like my job after I graduated high school was playing bass in a rock band for
Yeah.
3 years. And then something
At least you
happened.
played it.
Well,
At least you played it. I just put it around my neck and just,
uh,
pretended to play it.
well, I still do, and I absolutely enjoy it. I mean, we're talking like 53 years later, I'm still playing bass. I absolutely love it.
Good
And
man.
well, the cool thing is like it's incredible what music brings to the human soul. And
Mm.
it, well, what do they call it? The universal language. There's no words,
Mm.
but this language that music just gets right into the soul, and it it affects people differently, but deep down, it affects everybody pretty much the same. So it's
I
so
agree with
cool.
you, Richard, totally. Sorry to interrupt.
My job?
Sorry to interrupt you.
Uh, Come again?
No, sorry, did I interrupt you? Had you finished? Or
He's asking, Richard, he's asking if he interrupted you.
No, you didn't interrupt me.
well, just to follow on from what you said with uh, music. I mean, I'm involved with the project called Rock the World to Peace, which is
Yeah.
just about to and we're really doing really well with it at the moment. And the reason I'm in it is the fact that as I'm talking to you now, I'm looking at a Bob Dylan, a black and white photograph that I'd framed 40 odd years ago, and it's the times they are a changing. And without getting too deeply into it, the world has changed. We're on the verge of wars, and there's so much like hatred, and we need to learn to love again. And Bob Dylan like didn't stop the Vietnam War, but he made kids aware. Neil Young writing a song about the Kent State killings, four dead in Ohio and stuff. And artists don't do that. They have a platform, and then you have this person that's way above everybody else, like Taylor Swift, who's donating millions to every city she plays, but she does it really quietly and stuff. And this is a way to kind of bring back a bit of peace and love. I mean, it's not Woodstock. I mean, they were all getting stoned and getting laid, I suppose, but this is kind of trying to bring a little bit of civilization back, and I'm really excited about it. And I think I have the greatest admiration for artists that do have a voice, and I do think that it doesn't matter what type of music, but and again, this is the romantic side of me, but there's nothing like music to take you back to a time and a place. And the thing is, and again, it sounds calculated, but my lessons learned from rock and roll is when I talk about, I mean, why do they call Bruce Springsteen the boss? He's had the same staff for 53 years. The only two who've left have died. So tell me, Mr. Game Developer, why did you leave your job every 2 years to double your salary? Do you not think these guys, as in the E Street Band, could get a job anywhere? It's a great lesson in staff retention about how you hold on to people and stuff by loyalty and dedication to the cause, i.e., the band that they're in. But because it involves famous people, people listen to them differently. And the thing is, if I talk about, presentations that I do, if I talk about, the U2 growing up, learning their trade, and I have a photograph of them in the background having a barbecue at my house, without sounding like showing off, it's like, well, he's been there and done that. So they listen to what I'm saying. And the fact of the matter is, when you explain what it was about them that separated them from a lot of other bands, the thing is with U2, it was the complete package, the label. U2 were into the label for £250,000, not dollars, in tour support. That would never happen nowadays. They'd have been dropped. So when you look at emerging talent, the next U2 might be out there, but they might not have the opportunities that U2 had, which was a dedicated infrastructure around them and a brilliant manager. I mean, you rarely find a great band without a great manager as well. So these are the things that I kind of, you don't think getting a job in the music business is going to necessarily teach you. You just think the fact that I'm going to do it because I love it. But the more you get into it and the more you learn, and the more you learn about the people you don't want to go anywhere near, and the more you drift towards the people that it kind of, you each learn from each other. And I'm still, friends with a lot of people I worked with. That's the great thing about doing my podcast. I phoned the bass player from Frankie Goes to Hollywood up, and I interviewed him for my podcast. I haven't spoken to him for 40 years. And both of us are like, we were in the pub last night. And I don't mean to put music on a pedestal, but I don't think you remember like where you were when, a touchdown happened in a particular year or something, or who you went with. But I can remember like, David Bowie and the Spiders from Mars, and who I went with and the date of the gig in 1972 and stuff, even to the extent of when I emigrated, to use my own words, the music industry was falling apart around me, but I hadn't done anything wrong. But I had 10 staff and 6 company cars and a 10 grand a month overhead. So guess what? I did my Ziggy Stardust. I came out to America to reinvent myself. I had no idea. I mean, they call it entrepreneurial and limited, whatever you want. I call it flying by the seat of my pants. I did exactly what I'd done all the day, waking up and not having a clue what I was going to do. Unfortunately, I got an Alien Extraordinary Ability thing, which is awarded to people who've reached, quote, the pinnacle of success in the field of art and music. So I didn't have to go, and that was the time when the dollar and the pound were 2 for 1. So all the Brits were buying 3-bedroom pool homes, and then 2 years later they'd get thrown out and have nowhere to live because they just thought they'd lived the American dream. But I have no regrets. I mean, I was turning 50, and like I said, the music industry was falling apart around me, and I was naive enough to think that, when I was full on, I didn't think of a time when it would end. I mean, if I was a footballer, I was going to think, well, maybe if I'm in my 40s, I'm not going to play at that level again. But the record industry were downsizing, because at that period, like Napster had come on, and people were downloading. There was a generation of people growing up that they didn't think they have to pay for music. And then when Steve Jobs came in and went to the record companies with that offer about selling songs instead of albums, because at that time, people were buying albums and there may be like 3 or 4 songs on it, but you had to buy the album to get those other songs. And the record industry has always been driven by greed. It took them like 30 years to realize there wouldn't be anybody as big as the Beatles again. So when that came along and everything, and when I was working with, I mean, for instance, the classic example is David Bowie. If David Bowie had been running a record company at that time, he saw the internet coming before anybody in the record industry. He was the first person to release a record on the internet. But when that came, he would have been the first person to with Steve Jobs or the guy who started Napster say, let's have lunch, not like close them down. And the same thing happened with the BBC and the Pirates. The only way to surpass them is to close them down, not thinking something else will come along.
Mm. Wow. Thanks, Tony. Mark.
Thank you. I just really quickly, Tony, when you made the comment about not having any interest in hearing people cover songs exactly like the original, I came across, I put it in the chat window. I came across this recording from, I think, 1962 by Sammy Davis Jr. And it's just Sammy and a Brazilian classical guitarist
Oh, wow.
playing standards. And I was always a Sammy Davis Jr. fan. But until I bought that CD, I had no idea what a brilliant interpreter he was
Yeah.
of other people's songs. So I, for whatever it's worth, I highly recommend that disc. Or you could probably find it on Apple Music or streaming somewhere, or probably even
Yeah,
on
I'd love to hear
YouTube.
that. Yeah, yeah, that sounds great. I admire people like that. They kind of they go out of their comfort zone, and like I say, there are a lot of bands out there that churn out the same old, same old. I mean, there's a lot of American AOR. If you go back to punk, the reason that revolution happened in England was like a lot of the Brits were fed up of, a lot of the REO Speedwagons, the Bostons, the Foreigners, all with 12 albums with like maybe 3 or 4 songs that people liked on them.
Yep.
But
Yep.
it was kind of like every band that was coming together would kind of be a replica, but not as good a version as the original, but just think there's a market for that.
Yep.
Whereas, I mean, music does come in trends. Mind you, in saying that, I mean, I think hip hop and rap's been around for 30 years now, so maybe I'm wrong.
Mhm.
Minku.
Yeah, I was muted. Yeah. So as you spoke about all that wonderful stuff, with Mark coming up, going back all the way, in a few decades. So Tony, I'm not really a rock and roll addict.
That's fine.
Especially, I think Bowie and so many of that era I connect to, and but I just feel that today's rock, it's loudly cranked like a blast. Whether you're looking at Greta Van Fleet or you're looking at Arctic Monkeys, I just feel it's so overproduced and it's drenched in effects. So what's changed, Tony? I mean, why none of us feel gripped by rock and roll today? What do you think has changed with the rock stars of today?
Well,
What are we missing?
I'm not going to argue with you, Minku, but in a way, profession, I have to kind of not sound like, it wasn't like that in my day, because it reminds me of Top of the Pops when my dad used to come in and say, "What are you watching this crap for?" But I agree with you. But the thing is, I suppose a simple answer to it is technology. I mean, I could make a record. I can't sing and I can't play, but I could make a record. Well, there's something wrong with that. If I wanted to go and play for my favourite football team, I have to have a certain amount of talent. But if you're trained in technology and know exactly what to work with computers and stuff like that, you could make music. I mean, I have a guy who's a musician who is a keyboard player, but he's also a tech wizard. And he made this record through AI and stuff and things like that. So a lot of things are going to change. But I do feel that I do feel that the difficult thing with it is that a lot of stuff has been about brands as well. So you get an artist like Jay-Z who becomes phenomenally successful. I would have more chance with no talent of signing to Jay-Z and having the infrastructure of his organization putting me out than if I did it with a record company, because people buy into a brand. They'll buy his sneakers, they'll buy his shirts, they'll buy his records. But I think, there are 110,000 songs a day that get uploaded to Spotify. So you tell me what chance you have of being discovered by this void out there that's music. And record companies, they don't really sign artists unless they have to, because so much of the artist development thing comes out of social media. If you've got like X million streams or what have you and things like this, then they have to listen to you. But I do think there's people out there that are looking to technology to make music, and just have some saying it, but the finished product isn't that. And where it's going to go with AI, who knows? I mean, they did it with the Beatles, didn't they? They put John Lennon back in the Beatles, and they made a record. But I mean, it's a difficult one to answer, Minku, in as much as I agree with you, but I can't agree with you, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yes,
because
yes, completely.
because nobody talked to me.
It's just all over the place right now. Yeah. Thank you for
But
that.
just to answer it briefly, Minku, is that I don't think you'll have artists as influential as like the Bob Dylans and the David Bowies and the Bob Marleys, who are three completely different types of music, you know. But the great thing with people like Marley was Bob Marley. I mean, if you look at him, he's like this Rasta, you know. Some people would look at it and say, "Oh, I don't like reggae music," but the way Island Records promoted him was to a rock audience and to a pop audience, not to keep it in a specific genre, which like allowed him to be an artist that was accepted universally all over the world. In fact, even the 30 plus years he's been dead, there's nobody come anywhere near him. And I think the thing with Bowie, they're unique artists in what they do. And if you look at people like Bob Dylan, who came out the Greenwich Village folk scene, you know, he was influenced by a lot of the folk singers before him, the Woody Guthries and stuff. So there are a lot of artists that have had like people to look back on, but create their own individual career off the back of it. Whereas nowadays, I don't think there's as much need for people to do that, because you can have a successful music act that isn't really an act. Well, it is an act. It's not talent necessarily.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tony, if we can step outside your music career now for just a minute.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everybody talks about work-life balance. I guess in your case, it's work-life harmony, pun intended there. Talk about your family from the early days growing up to where you are today.
Talk about my family. What do you mean?
In any way you can. Tell me about your family.
Well, my family, my mother was, in fact, it's funny you should mention this, Dennis, because I just, my wife bought me an ancestry kit about a year ago, and I had a guy approach me the other week, and he wrote a book on the Greeks in Liverpool, and he's doing a book on the Greeks in Manchester. And he said, I'm probably the most famous Greek to come out of Manchester in recent times. So he wants to write a chapter on me, but he found some amazing things out. Some of the things were weird, like I had a brother that died shortly after birth. But my mother taught yoga for 47 years, and she was a widow by the time she was 40, chairperson of the Save the Children Fund, the Spastic Society. You know, she was a great human, and she spoke ancient Greek and things like that. My father liked kind of classical music and things like that. So it wasn't like there wasn't any music connection. I mean, my brother, who was older than me, who's passed away recently, was a big Elvis Presley fan. So I didn't have many conversations within the family growing up. I don't know if I'm answering your question here.
Yeah, I think you are, yeah.
Well, the thing is, my kids have always been into music, you know, but the thing is, they don't necessarily follow trends, but they don't just go and listen to records that I never forced them onto. Like some people, you know, a lot of musicians, for instance, like take Bruce Springsteen, his daughter is an Olympian, you know, she's a horse rider and things. It wasn't that you push them into thinking, well, follow your father's path and stuff like that. So I wouldn't, because it's a vastly changed business, and I suppose in a way, it's always kind of creeping up behind it, because there is a day that it's going to end. Because, like with me, you know, that when RCA Records and Arista, which is BMG, Bertelsmann Group, were cutting back, you know, they replaced me with one person sat behind the desk in London. I could have represented the label in an office opening in Manchester, 2 promotional tours around in the UK, and I could have been at meetings in London. And it took them a year to replace me. But I digress. But going back to the family type of thing, my children are grown-ups, and they're capable of making their own decisions, and they're both very successful in their own right. My daughter's, you know, specializes in leadership and stuff, and she's very well respected. My son's works at McCann, the marketing company, so he's working within making promotional videos and stuff and things like that. So I learn a lot from my kids as well as, you know, by, I mean, there is a distance. We're constantly, you know, I was back from my son's wedding a few weeks ago. And it's great to kind of compare notes because I suppose in a way I wouldn't want them to follow my path because I don't think that they would have the chance to be as successful. When I say successful, you know, like being able to work in an industry that allowed artists to grow. Whereas now, you know, you two would never have the time to reach any level of success if they signed with a label today. And it's also about signing with the right people who believe in you and stick by you.
Hmm. Thanks for that. You know, you've done so much, Tony. Professionally, you moved around the world. You've kind of walked with people that few of us get to walk with. What's left on your bucket list?
Well, as I mentioned before, I'm involved with this project called Rock the World to Peace, which is about making a difference in the same way that artists used to make a difference, you know, in people's lives. I mean, we go back a long time, but there hasn't been a movement that has really concentrated on changing the world and making people think differently. I mean, Steve Jobs came up with that phrase with Apple, and that's why he was a game changer in his own right. He was even pivotal in what happened in the music industry. He wasn't alive to see it, but he changed it completely. But with what we're doing, we're allowing opportunities for emerging talent to expose them on a platform with our website where people get an opportunity to hear a couple of songs by a band they've never heard. And they have to support the cause by saying we're proud to be associated with the Rock the World to Peace movement. And at the end, they have to do like a fist bump or something like this. But we're giving them an opportunity which is separate to just uploading your content on YouTube and hoping, apart from friends and family, that the odd person finds you by accident. So we're making it a portal for discovery. And the thing is, as we reach out and grow through it, you know, we'll have merchandise, we'll have stuff like that. We want to put on, you know, events that involve all the people that we're talking about, and just make people sit up and realize that, you know, change never happens if it's not about people making it, and it needs somebody to reach out and you know, trigger off the idea. So I'm really proud to be involved with it.
Good.
The other thing is I do a podcast which is called Moments That Rock, which is incredibly self-indulgent because my premise is like when I did radio back in the day, and I still do a couple of radio shows now. Like when did my own radio show in Manchester, it was like, well, if I like these records, why wouldn't other people? Well, if I enjoy hearing other people's stories, then why wouldn't others? I interviewed a guy called Andy Peebles the other week, who was at the BBC, and he did the last interview with John Lennon. And he talks about thinking he'd get an hour and a half with Lennon. So he flew to New York with his producer. He got 3.5 hours with him. He went out to dinner with him. The following day, he went shopping with the producer in Manhattan, got on a plane, got off the plane, and Lennon had died. And I don't want to put a downer on it, but you know about music taking people back to a time and a place. Who doesn't remember where they were when John Lennon was assassinated? You know, that's what I mean. And the thing is with uh senior moment, what was the question?
I think you've covered it. I'm
There was,
gonna
some-
I'm
there
gonna
was
let
something else.
I'm gonna let Jody say a few words. Or Jody?
Yes, hi, and everyone. I just returned to Tampa, so thankfully my place is all in good shape, but I'm kind of internet unstable, so I apologize for the lack of video. But Tony, I was just wondering with Rock the World for Peace, if you could give this group and me, you know, any idea of when you expect to launch the website, and then also I think it's really valuable for people to know how to reach out about it if they have artists that they want to put forth for you and
Yeah,
you
good
know all
question.
that because it's just such an exciting project.
Yeah, well,
I'm so happy about it.
it's great. It is a great project in as much as what we are in the process of. We had somebody commissioned to make the website, but unfortunately it was the wrong person because he was an audio engineer and he didn't do it right. So now we're reaching out to get somebody to finish it off. It doesn't have to be all bells and whistles website. It just has to, we don't exist until we have the website. We were always going to do a soft launch now and then launch properly in the new year because when you think of it, we got Thanksgiving, we've got Halloween, we've got Christmas, everything kind of closes down at this time of the year. So we've got 30 to 40 artists already on board, and we hope to have the website done and dusted within hopefully 10 days or so. I'm speaking to somebody today, and it's just a case of having somebody coming on board and offering, their ability to tweak it. And, it's more things like the right colors and the right fonts. And you need somebody that's got a creative mind that can look at something and see something that stands out that isn't right and repair it and then deliver it back to us. And then we're up and running. So, yeah, we'd like to be having. We did expect to have a website up by now, but it will be in the not too distant future. So watch this space.
Great. Thanks for that.
Interesting that music is coming back into the forefront for peace, because that was very much a part of the movement, 60s through 70s.
Yeah. And that's what's been missing. It wasn't my idea, but I mean, it was just a simple call, and it was kind of like, I'm in, because and a lot of people have said the same thing when you reach out to them, and it's comments like, at last, somebody that cares. And I just think it takes somebody to move the needle by just, it's not a sell to anybody. It's just, we're doing this. Do you want in? And it's not a lot of the time with the people there's only three of us that are really building it, but it will bring a lot of people in. We have people who are building an app. We did have somebody to do the website, people involved with merchandise and stuff. So we'll have specialists in every areas. And I do honestly believe that we'll get a lot of media interest where we can talk about it and not so much sell it, but just make people. I think with everything, it's about creating awareness
Mhm.
and just pointing people in a direction. We're not forcing people into it in the same way that, even going back to my career, I never, people didn't play records because they liked me. They listened to them because they respected me. So if you get a team of people around that have kind of in their own areas of expertise have kind of been there and done it, and then collide, come together with the right mindset, then you throw yourself into it, and you can't dictate the speed that it advances, but we're on the one hand exhausted, on the other side pleasantly surprised. Because you want to grow things at your own pace, but sometimes it gets out of control. But I'm very confident that we'll make it work. And I do think the side I love about it is yes, if it makes people, think more about love than war and hatred and things like that. But if it also helps artists at the same time, then there's a lot of double dipping where everybody benefits. We'll benefit because we know that we feel it's the right time to do something like this. So if it works, we'll feel glad about that. If it helps a lot of other bands get a step up the ladder, then that's great. And if it makes a difference in everything that's out there and people do start to think differently, then it's a win-win.
Tony, this one's going to probably venture outside, or I'm not, let me back up. This one should venture outside the music industry as well, although in your world, maybe it can't. But if you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and what would you want to ask them?
Wow, that's a good question. Oh, um, I suppose in a way, I mean, I'd be sitting here pausing for hours, but I might say somebody like George Best from my growing up period, who played for Manchester United and Northern Ireland, because I grew up, my teenage years were, even before, buying records and stuff, I was always a big football fan, and I would be there at 12 o'clock for a 3 p.m. kickoff. And George Best was probably the greatest footballer I'd ever seen. But he in many ways was a rock star in his own right, in as much as it was alcohol and, lifestyle that killed him. Because again, you attract the wrong type of people. You can go into any bar, into any club, and you can be given VIP treatment. They give you champagne. You'll have, hundreds of women around you. Everything's dead easy because of the fact that you're brilliant at what you do. But you do get the people that sap into you and bleed you and don't look after you, and that's happened. But I think George Best was, gone far too soon. Um, And it would be nice to just get him in a situation where you're just sitting down, the two of you, and just asking out a few questions. I think it's easy to say now because he's probably been dead about 40 years, but I would probably come up with a different answer if I had time to think it through, Dennis. But um, yeah, I mean, in a way, yeah. I mean, maybe Elvis Presley. That would be
Mm.
pretty cool. Go around to Gracelands and asking him how it all came about. But I found that in within the music business, I've met different people along the way. I ended up meeting Keanu Reeves, working with him. He put a record out, and I found out that he put a record out and picked up a bass guitar because of this guy called Peter Hook, who had promoted all his records in New Order, and I managed him. When he left him, I thought, wow, so I kind of thought that would have been so cool to get them playing together. But that's kind of more modern. But
Yep.
Presley would have been a whole different ball game because there was kind of, it's funny really because I look at rock stars and you look at, like, if you wanted to create an image and a look, then it doesn't come much better than on the male side of things than Bowie and Elvis Presley, because you can't make anybody look like either of them.
Tony, you've shared a lot of your insights into your background and all that. Is there anything we might be surprised to learn about you?
Well, it's funny. We moved, as you know, Dennis, we moved out of Florida a year ago, and as I'm sat here, I've got like, I do in a way feel I'm entering the most exciting part of my career because there's developments with Moments That Rock. I'm working with some great people who've got an idea about putting some, footage together to maybe make a docu-series of the Rock the World to Peace. I love doing my podcasts. I want to write kind of another book. I want to go back and revisit my first book because it's funny because I don't sing and I don't play, but I think like an artist. So if anybody was to buy my book that I bought out 13 years ago, I'd be like, oh, you don't want that. I'm so much better than that now. In the same way that if you were an artist and you like um, a song that they wrote 5 years ago, and I had first-hand experience of that from Simply Red. The guy didn't want it to come out because it was in the previous band he was in, and the record company persuaded him to put it out, and it became like a #1 record in America. So who was right? But the thing is, an artist thinks that the song he wrote last night was the best thing he ever did. Whereas I think if anybody bought my first book, I would push him away because I would like to go back and revisit it and take it into a series of shorter books and have a 20-page book on opportunities, on risks, on preparing for success, on dealing with fame, um, on all the subject matters that relate to the artist that I've seen firsthand, And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of artists that I'm not even going to bother mentioning that I learned absolutely nothing from. Um, and strangely enough, I was right because a lot of those, well, the bigger ones, no, because they were famous before I was working with them. And I'm not talking about um, Bowie and people like that, but certain artists that I've worked that, full of their own self-importance and don't think about the others. Because I've always said that for me, the biggest artists are the easiest to work with because they realize it's not all about them. It's about a team of people. And when I worked with Bowie and saw a bunch of people that had been with him for 20 years who stuck with him, not because he's David Bowie, but because they were allowed to be the best version of themselves, I think. Um, it's kind of like I've said this many times. I do honestly feel that I'm entering, arguably at 71, the most exciting period in my career because I don't have any overhead. I don't have staff. I don't have company cars. I don't have premises. I don't have a huge overhead. It's little old me. And I'm making better decisions with the people I'm working with now. I adore as human beings, but I adore them for all the right reasons because they're going to bring the best out in me. And if I can, in return, deliver what my package is, so to speak, then we're all happy ever after. But I want to, I want to write and talk about what I did and what I learned, but I want to inspire people in a way that, you know, there might be people that kind of don't know which way to turn. And I do give them straight in your face advice because sometimes people say, like, they want to be a rock star or something. I would say, don't give up your day job because it's not an easy entry route type things. And then you get, you know, because nobody's going to be Taylor Swift. There's like somebody there, and then everybody's kind of there, and then you get lesser mortals and somebody who're doing a bit better. But you don't have the opportunities in a way to build an artist like you used to, and there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And with emerging talent, they have to do a lot of the work themselves because social media plays such a huge part um, in creating awareness. And you don't have the radio stations that are playing up and coming bands and stuff. They stick to, you know, especially with the commercial stations, they have to satisfy advertisers and shareholders and stuff.
Thanks. We've got about 5 minutes to go. I'm going to turn it back over to Mark.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make a quick comment in what response to what you've been sharing with us, Tony, and especially back to the beginning about, being excited about getting up every day and not having the vaguest idea what's going to happen. Um, we've had conversations on Dennis's friendship bench about the necessity of living with uncertainty. And
Yeah.
and that's absolutely true. But I would like to suggest to you that living with the uncertainty constructively also takes courage, because if you're willing to do things in the face of uncertainty, you also have to recognize the possibility of failing. And you have to be strong and courageous enough to get back up and give it another shot, even if that shot is something different. So I'm making these
No,
comments because my hat is off to you, my friend.
no, that's a great comment, Mark, because it just takes me into thinking about somebody everybody's heard of, Richard Branson. He's had more businesses fail than anybody could ever dream of. He's had Virgin Brides, Virgin Litter, but you only think of like, I mean, for instance, when he started the label, he was smart. He's not a music man. He was smart enough to bring two guys in, Simon Draper and Nick Powell, who were music people. Nobody at that time would have signed Mike Oldfield, right, with an album like that, Tubular Bells. But that's what propelled the label. And he started with a loan from his mother, and he started doing mail order records. But all the things that he's failed, and I read an article about him when he said, I've never worried about any company I started failing as long as I wasn't ashamed to put the Virgin name to it. So if he thought it was worthy of the Virgin name, if it came through, it was a bonus. And he's had enough things because obviously the airline, even the smart business decisions. I mean, we had an artist at Ireland, Steve Winwood, had a #1 record in America, and Branson was floating, you know, the label to get money in for the airline, and he signed Steve Winwood, who'd been a #1 artist, to actually, you know, create that visibility for him. And I have the greatest respect for him, and he's very human in as much. I actually got on a flight once that was delayed for such and such, and I wrote to him complaining about it, and he actually wrote back to me himself. You know, it was the early days of Virgin. It reminds me, I never used up that ticket he gave me. Never mind. But yeah, but I have great admiration for people like that. And what you were saying, Mark, is spot on, because I think it's kind of contradictory to say people are frightened to be courageous, but there's a certain excitement in being scary, because sometimes you have to kick yourself up the ass to do things. And I have the greatest respect for people that take chances and aren't, you know, most people, I mean, everybody here probably knows more of them than I do, but I have the greatest respect for people that are out there trying to make it work. And I think if you find something that you do honestly believe in and you give it your all and you fail, you can get up in the morning and think, well, you know what? I tried, and I tried really hard. And like going back to some of the people I've worked with, my success has been driven by assembling the right amount of people that worked not only for me, but with me, and that I collaborated with on projects. And to get the best out of the artist, relationships are important. Building up relationships on trust and integrity, and, you know, the type of person you want to have a beer with.
I'll just offer this in contrast to Richard Branson. I don't know if you have access to Netflix, but I've started to watch a recent series on Netflix called Mr. McMahon. And it's about Vince McMahon, the guy who founded the World Wrestling Federation, now World Wrestling Entertainment, or whatever it's called. That guy believed in what he was doing too, but he was a shameless and utterly unethical and ruthless egomaniac.
Yeah.
And he's on his way to a very sad end.
Well, the thing is, those are the people. I mean, there's that phrase, isn't there? There's the same people you meet on the way up that you meet on the way down. And I
Yeah.
think some of these people get full of their own self-importance. And then when all of a sudden, their 15 minutes of fame goes, then people don't want to go anywhere near them. So they realize that, they manipulated them their way into something to get something out of it, but kind of nothing lasts forever. And then they're left out on their own, and nobody feels guilty about having nothing to do with them because it's their own fault.
Amen to that.